and I'm one of Mayad's directors. And for this session, it's all about the wedding day preparations, starting with the wedding day workflow. Before I tell you about everything else, you need to know about what Mayad is in terms of composition, in terms of how many people are there in the team, what gears we use, and so on and so forth. And so for the team setup, there's usually 6 of us. There's 3 shooters, 2 assistants, and 1 SDE editor. For the first shooter, he's the main cam, or in Mayad, we call him the traditional shooter. He's the one who's in charge of documenting everything in the wedding ceremony, from preps until reception, so he usually gets the biggest file size. Second, reaction shooter, or the second cam, as we call it. He's the one in charge for shooting all of the reactions, maybe guests, or the couple, or anyone in the room to that point. Third, creative shooter, which is the hardest part of them all. Creative shooter is in charge of making the video look good. He thinks that the traditional shooter and the reaction shooter gets all of the safety shots, and his part is to make sure that in every video that he makes, it's something that would represent Mayad. It's something that would make your video stand out. The fourth person in the team is the SDE editor. He's the one who's facing the laptop most of the time. He gets the files from the shooters and makes sure everything is edited before the showing of the SDE, during reception. So the last 2 people in the team are the production assistants. There's 2 of them. Before we didn't have them, but it was so hard. Instead of us shooting, we find ourselves carrying stuff, which wasn't efficient for us. The next stop is the camera settings. Camera settings for me are very important. It needs to be the same all throughout the 3 shooters. And on my personal taste, I have these settings. These are the most important things for you as a cinematographer. You need to have the right picture profile, gamma, color mode, record settings, and the white balance. If you have all of these 5, there's less chances of you not getting the right shots. Okay, let's start with picture profile. I usually use PP7, and I don't use the S-Log mode, because if you're going to have something fast in weddings, it's not really that advisable to have that much time for color editing. And so, for me, I personally choose Cine 4 Pro because the colors are already there. It feels nice, you know. And yeah, you could get the 24 FPS, but 60 FPS is okay for me. You get an option to have it in slow-mo, and then in the clips, when you're editing, you could always interpret the footage to 24 FPS or 30 if you want to. And last but not the least, the white balance. For me, I'm a little bit of OC in terms of how I see my screen, how I see what I see from the camera. And so I personally choose Kelvin to match what I see with my eyes compared to having that judgment from the camera itself. That is, these settings apply for me personally. But for you guys, you could do whatever you want. You could choose S-Log if you find it very useful for you, and if you're not in a hurry. And you can also have it on auto white balance, but I really suggest you set the camera from what you see with your eyes. One of the biggest parts of a wedding is the preparation. It's one of the longest parts, and if you don't make use of it, it's going to be a big hindrance for your SDE or your same-day edit. So I've come up with a list of important parts of the preparations. Details, establishing shots, moments, beauty shots or bridal elegance, groom shots, and the dress-up shots of the both of them. When I go to weddings, I make sure that I communicate with my couple what they want to see in their SDE in terms of the details. It's very crucial. Why? Because if you come to a wedding and you shoot all of the details, you're going to waste time with shooting the moments and the other things. And so it is important to know your priority in terms of shooting details. Like for example, you only have 4. The rings, the shoes, the gown, the bouquet of flowers, And let's start with the rings. It's one of those things that you don't want to miss in the SDE. And how do you get those gorgeous ring shots? Some or most of my couples, when they have me for their wedding day, they would want to see how intricate their wedding rings are. And so, these are the items or the gears, materials that you need to have those kinds of shots. The kinds of shots where it's really tight, it's macro, you would see the glitters of the diamond, you would see the beauty of the ring from a very, very tight perspective. Tripods, you may have one or two, but two is advisable. LED lights to give a little bit of fun for the lighting. And of course, the lens that you're going to use, the most suggested would be a macro lens, probably 100mm. When we were shooting rings before, we had simple shots. But then we realized that it could have been more elegant. It could have been more. And so, the things that inspired us are lights, movement of the light, from left to right, top to bottom, movement of the ring itself. You can turn it around, turn it clockwise or counterclockwise, have a different angle from the camera, and so on and so forth. Most of the details that you're going to shoot, you will be needing 100mm. It's because you wanted to show how intricate it is. You wanted to show how beautiful it is. You can use a foreground if you want. Mostly you get reflectors or LEDs to make a better lighting. So this applies to the shoes, to the bouquet, to the gown. And what I noticed with the gown is that almost all of the videos that I've seen have this shot where you see the gown with a mannequin. And so for me, it has become too redundant. It's become a waste of duration. Instead, I wanted to have more moments with the SDE. How I shoot the wedding gown would be just the details of it. And then when I show the beauty of the gown, it's with the bride wearing it. So imagine this. While someone's shooting the details, the other shooter is shooting the establishing shots. Now this usually happens at the same time. Establishing shots are the ones that make you feel where the video is, where the video was done, where the video was taken. And so, usually you get wide shots of that, or you could even show landmarks of very important places to give people a little bit of hint of where you are. Okay. So the gears that we use for establishing shots are any wide focal length lenses. You know, you could have like a 16-35, a 24-70, other cine lenses. You can even use your Osmo if you want. You could also use tripod to match that, or a gimbal. You know, the days before, you needed to bring like a big crane, a jib, with heavy weights, just to get the direction of up and down. But nowadays, with the new gimbals reaching the market, you could have a very powerful tool with just using one hand. Gimbals are also very powerful in a sense that you can combine wide lenses and tight lenses. For me, I personally use a CineLens, a combination of two lenses, which has the same weight but have different focal lengths. So when I use a gimbal, I have a wide lens and a tight lens, but has the same size and same weight. And when I switch from one lens to another, it's very efficient for me. Also, the last one would be drones. Drones have become very popular nowadays. And it has become very popular also in countries or cities where they ban it. So you need to be careful. Drones can be very powerful if used well. I personally use a Phantom 3 or 4 just because it feels right. You could also use other drones, but what's more important is what's on the inside, on what you're seeing. It's always advisable to shoot at 4K, but it's very tricky when using it in low light. Right now, I'm going to help you in achieving shots for establishing. It could be tips, it could be how-tos, and one of them are always the mindset. Always start with the mindset. Before you pick up your camera, before you know if you're going to have a tripod or a gimbal, you need to imagine first how you wanted to see your establishing shots. How do you do that? Where do you start? If I were you, I would ask myself, what kind of music am I using? What's the pacing of the music? This question applies to everything that you're going to be shooting. From establishing shots to bridal elegance to everything else. If I'm going to have a fun song, what kind of establishing shot would I make? Like, is it going to be like a fast-paced gimbal movement? Is it going to be like a static shot? Always remember, your pacing of shooting with your camera, maybe in establishing, maybe in other terms, should go with what your music feels. If you're gonna have something subtle, you would want something static. For instance, getting a tripod, having a wide lens, appreciating the beauty, letting something pass by the camera. Sometimes, if you're having something exciting, you need some establishing shots that are moving. Use your foreground. Use something that depicts movement. Usually, what you use with those kinds of shots are gimbals and a wide type of lens. Also be mindful to not repeat the type of shots that you've been doing for the same place. If you're going to make different videos of the same location, how would you make an establishing shot that makes it look as if it's the first time you've shot there? So always remember, use a combination of all of these things to make something unique every time. When shooting weddings, establishing shots are plentiful. It could be anywhere. It could be the church, it could be the hotel, it could be the reception, it could be the room. It's anything that would make you feel where your subjects are. That's the most important thing. There are countries where they are known for what they are, for their scenic view, like the waves of Bali, the cliffs, the beaches of Maldives, or the city of New York. Or sometimes it can go as personal as how special it was for the couple, why they were there in the first place, why they wanted their wedding to be there. Establishing shots can be tricky, especially if you're having it inside the room. There are two types, actually. An outdoor or an exterior, and an interior establishing shots. What are the things that you need to consider when shooting outside, outdoor? In shooting videos, it's good to make a story. And having stories mean that you can have a combination of shots, like a wide shot, a medium shot, and a tight shot. It doesn't only apply for establishing shots, but it also applies for everything. Going back to the big picture, when you arrive, the first shooter can shoot the details, second shooter can shoot establishing shots, and the third shooter could be inside the room, looking for moments. It's one of the most important parts. Weddings are full of emotions. Shooters who are assigned for moments have these types of gears. Usually they have from mid to tight focal length, like a 50 mm or a 70 to 100 mm. These give you the power to not be obvious. Sometimes when you get too close to your subject, you don't get the reactions that you need because they feel that they are being watched, and so they would shy away. Using telephoto lenses can be very, very useful if you're waiting for moments to happen. Usually you would pair those lenses with a tripod or a monopod. A monopod is better in terms of mobility so that you could get different reactions, different parts of people talking to one another so subtly that they keep on talking without noticing that you're moving from one place to another. And of course, it's really advisable to have a microphone on top of your camera to make sure that you capture those laughter, those crying, those giggles and stuff. So how do you look for moments inside the room? What is one key factor that would make your shots stand out from others? It's by having that anticipation. Sense the room around you. It's under your control. If someone appears from the door, anticipate that they're going to talk to the bride or someone else and have your position ready. Where would you be? Where would you be that they wouldn't notice you, that they wouldn't be camera shy, that they would feel the need to hug one another and talk to one another? Sometimes you find yourself shooting the perfect moment, but then you realize that you were not recording at all. And so what this means is that moments are timeless. These are the types that you cannot just repeat. These are very important. And if you miss them, it's totally gone. You can make them do it again, but it's never going to be the same. It's never advisable to do that. What was happening before, when you were shooting weddings, is that people are waiting for the bride to dress up and everything is rushed. Mayed was able to do something about it. And that's the bridal shot. Bridal elegance. It's making use of the extra time of the bride before dressing up and doing beauty shots with them. And so to make this bridal shot effective, these are the following gears that we're going to use. Any wide aperture lens, the 1.4, 1.2, those creamy, beautiful shots that just blur everything that you don't want to see in the background, it's going to be very useful. You usually match it with a monopod or a gimbal. And it's always best to have a reflector or an extra source of light to make your image or your subject more interesting. When shooting bridal elegance, it's always about thinking about the couple or your bride. Imagine if you're going to shoot this, would she like it or not? Would she want it to be in the video or not? And so these are the most important things that you need to consider when shooting them. First one, be careful with the silhouette. You always want to get the best angle from your bride or your couple. Double chins. As much as possible, if you see that present in your subject, have them look up or have your camera look from a top angle or a top view to avoid it. Okay? Shaky hands. If you have movements and your subject feels as if it's their first time in front of the camera, they would really feel tense. And so you would see the shaking of the hands are very present. To avoid that, you could always get them to be very comfortable to you, laugh with them, make them feel that it's as if it's not their first time in front of the video, and it will just eventually go away. Droopy eyes. Sometimes, if your bride doesn't know where to get the emotions from, you would make them do things, but it doesn't show in the face. Also, the same goes with the awkward smile. If you tell them to smile, they would give you the photo type of smile. But if you tell them to get their happiness from somewhere, make them remember things, make them feel something, and then they would eventually smile, that's something else. Forehead face is a little tricky. And when we shoot bridal elegance, it's really best to have your hair down. Have their hair down. And so use that hair to make it look more sexier, to make them have that angle that they weren't expecting at all. Now, one big thing that you can make use of with the bridal elegance, it gives you the chance to show how beautiful your bride is, to show how elegant she could be, to give you that part in the SDE when the groom talks about the bride, you would show something beautiful about her. Bridal elegance can start from the room to an outdoor shot. In indoor shots, make use of the light. You can use an LED, a reflector, or the sun. Place your bride near the window where you could have more details with light. Place a reflector on the other side so that you could have better lighting from the other side of the angle. Imagine what type of elegance would you want to convey. Is it something subtle? Is it something fun? Is it something light? What are the actions that you're going to do? Are you going to have her just stand there? Is there going to be wind with her hair? Is she going to be smiling? And so, emotions need to go with your actions when shooting bridal elegance. Now, once you finish the bridal elegance, eventually, the bride needs to dress up. And usually, you have a 2-cam setup there. And the director focuses on the bride, and the reaction shooter focuses on the reactions of the other guests inside the room to make a story out of it. And so while the bride is being shot for her dress-up, the groom has his own cinematographer. So we only have one shooter to go to him, and these are the gears that he needs. Okay. He could have any wide aperture lens. He can bring a monopod or a gimbal or both at the same time, since aside from shooting the usual dressing up, he's going to be shooting a few solo shots of the groom as well. And of course, if he could bring an assistant with him that's carrying a reflector or an LED, it would be better. Inside the groom shots is a combination of moments and solo groom elegance at the same time. And so this single shooter should be able to create a story out of everything that's happening inside the room. So mobility is key. That's why using a monopod or a gimbal is always the best option. For us, we're using Sony cameras. And so it gives us the ability to double the value of our lens. So if I have a 50mm, I could make it from 50 to 100. If you have anything lower than 50, just double the amount. So it's really good if you are by yourself and you need something wide, at the same time you need something a little telephoto. 50mm is always advisable, and anything around that range could be doable. Comes the usual dress up of the groom, and then how do you make something interesting out of it? Maybe you can use the watch, or what he's wearing, or how he does it, like putting on the coat, and so on and so forth, as long as it looks cool and would really happen in real life. That could be something interesting and could be some point of creativity that you could put on. You could have them face the window, sit on a chair, sit on a table, or do something really cool. So that's basically the most important things that you need to know for the preparation side. From shooting the details, to having a nice establishing shot, to doing some cool shots of the bride and the groom, how you would shoot them for the dress up. We were able to show you how it's done, the Mayad style, and I hope you were able to learn a few things from there. And we'll see you on the next episode.